Listen. Turn me up, turn me up, turn me up.
We're back, and you're listening to MMA Today. MMA Today is a radio program designed to give you all the latest news and information about MMA. We'll be reviewing recent events, interviewing fighters and other insiders in the industry, and we will preview upcoming events. We invite you to call in and to share your opinion or ask any questions of our guests and hosts. Our number is 561-588-0675 or 866-936-9727. This segment is being brought to you by PennyJoeMMA.net, a great place for all the latest MMA news, the best in MMA gear and apparel, and some of the top articles in MMA. Check it out at PennyJoeMMA.net. I'd like to introduce our guest now. She's been in MMA since 2007. She has a wrestling background and fights out of Tacoma, Washington. She hasn't lost since 2009 and has an impressive professional record of 12 wins and 2 losses. She's the current Strikeforce Women's Bantamweight Champion. I'd like to welcome Miesha Tate. Miesha, thanks for taking the time to join us here on MMA Today.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Let me ask you a question. Does it surprise you that your fight is the main fight of the event?
I'm surprised, no, but I'm really excited about it, definitely. I was hoping that, if they weren't able to put together the Grand Prix fight, that they would, give the women the co-main event the rightful responsibility of moving up to the main event, and, that they would have enough faith that we could carry that weight. And I believe we do.
Well, I've always felt that the women fighters, I say it to this day, I still haven't seen a women's fight that was boring. I've seen a lot of fights with guys that were boring, but the women seem to bring it on, and they're usually extremely active, and it's a very interesting fight. How important is Strikeforce to the survival and growth of women's MMA?
I think it's really important, and the reason being because Strikeforce is the ones that are supporting us and able to give us that mainstream exposure, which is really what we need for us to grow and develop our fan base. And that's what it's really all about. Without the fans, we don't have this big sport. We wouldn't be able to do it for a living. We wouldn't be able to do what we love for a living. So having fans is huge. It's important in the men's MMA, and it's just as important in the women's MMA. And the women struggle a little bit more for that, to gain the followership and the fans and whatnot. The more that we get support from the UFC and Strikeforce saying, hey, we endorse this, we think it's okay, we think it's awesome, check it out, more people are going to go, oh, yeah, this is pretty awesome, or that is great, or that was an amazing fight, male or female. We were entertained, bottom line.
Well, as an interested observer in MMA and Strikeforce in particular, because in my opinion, before Zuffa acquired Strikeforce, there was a huge pool of extremely talented fighters in Strikeforce, and once Zuffa acquired Strikeforce, we see the skimming of some of those top talented fighters over into the UFC. And in fact, the last event Strikeforce put on had an extremely poor attendance, and that concerns me. Does that concern you as a fighter in Strikeforce?
Yeah, I want to see Strikeforce's future and, their survival, but I think there's still time. I think that the way that it was being promoted before the UFC got a hold of it wasn't as good as it can be promoted. I think the UFC is working with it, and I'm really excited to hear that the undercards are going to now be televised on I think, what is it, Showtime Extreme or something like that. I think that'll be good because it'll get more exposure for people to follow the up-and-coming fighters. Some of the fights on the undercards are really awesome. I heard that this last UFC, I didn't get a chance to watch it because I was in my cousin's wedding, but this last Saturday I heard that the undercard fights were better than the main card fights, and sometimes it's that way with Strikeforce too, but the fact that they're only airing or have the opportunity to air the main card fights, you don't get to build as many stars because they don't get to see the fighters that are up-and-coming. So it's nice to see them getting some, or soon to be getting some of that limelight shared a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Does the fact that the female MMA community is relatively small compared to the men make it easier or harder to make it in women's MMA?
Can you say that again? The fact that what?
Well, there's so few women MMA fighters as opposed to men MMA fighters. Does that make it harder trying to make it in MMA as a woman? Or would it be easier if there was a lot more female fighters?
Well, there's two ways you can look at it. I think it's a lot easier to get to the top. You know, if you have talent and you know, the right way that Strikeforce or whatever organization feels like they can market you, then you can rise to the top really quickly, because it's kind of like you're a big fish in a small pond sense. And with the men's MMA, there's just so many fighters that the champions right now are really, like, they had to work really hard to swim to the top and make it and get that recognition, because there's so many more men that want to do it. However, if there was more women that did it, you know, we'd have more fights and interesting matchups we could make, and more names that we could build. And so there's that way to look at it too. So I'd like to see the depth grow. Obviously, we need that in order to have the UFC even get behind us more and ever consider getting into the UFC. We have to have that depth. But, you know, in rising to the top and becoming a champion and whatnot, it's easier because there's not as many women. You know, that's just the fact of the matter.
You had made a comment earlier about your upcoming opponent, Ronda Rousey, saying basically that she probably wasn't really in line for the next shot at the title. What was your thinking when you made that comment?
Well, I mean, if you look at take all things into consideration and her background and how long she's been doing this and whatnot, I still don't feel that on paper, with her accomplishments in MMA, was the #1 contender. I still feel that the #1 contender is Sarah Kaufman. Sarah Kaufman's 14-1. Her only loss is to the former champion, Marloes Coenen, who's 19-5. And, you know, Sarah Kaufman has a win over myself as well a few years ago, so that makes for an interesting dynamic in that it's, you know, it would be a rematch, and she would be challenging me for the title that she once had. You know, and, you know, I beat the girl that beat her, but she beat me, so it's kind of weird, you know. And so I feel like that Sarah Kaufman kind of had the rug pulled right out from under her feet, and I also feel it kind of sucks because, you know, before Ronda really came onto the scene, they brought Sarah Kaufman to my fight with Marloes, and they even took the time to TV interview her and say, hey, you know, you're going to be fighting the winner of this. What do you think is going to happen? This and that. And so, I mean, it was pretty well understood that she was going to be the one to fight the winner between Marloes and myself. And then Ronda kind of popped in the scene with this, you know, kind of brash, outspoken attitude, and you know, she's feminine. So I mean, I think that they like that aspect. She really, you know, plays that up well. But she's only 4-0, and you know, the opponents that she has fought have all been at 145. So this is her first drop to 135. And she doesn't have a long history in the sport, her career being only a year old. And the quality of opponents that she's beat, you know, they're fine for where she's at in the beginning of her career. But when you're talking about making that leap from fighting, you know, a Julia Budd, who was 2-1 and now is 2-2 after losing her, to fighting me, who's been in the sport for 6 years, has a lot stronger of a background in wrestling, which I believe will be her weakness. And I'm 12-2. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make as much sense. But I think the reason why Strikeforce did that is because they want to sell fights. They want to create a fan base, and they realize that, you know, it's not just about who should be next. It's about what the fans want to see. And, you know, when it comes right down to it, I think that's the fight that the fans want to see the most. And so I understand their standpoint in that this is an entertainment business as well as a sport. I don't think that Strikeforce expects me to win, actually. I think that they really like Ronda, and I think, you know, she's just kind of come on the scene with such a different outlook, and, you know, she's created a different kind of a fan base in that, you know, she's more of the trash talker and dramatic, and I think everyone's really wowed by her judo Olympic background and whatnot, and, you know, she's kind of flashy. She goes out there and does this crazy stuff, and she's been able to submit everyone in under a minute, and I think that the way that they're looking at it is, you know, it's a win-win situation. They like both of us. I have a long history with them, and I put on some great fights and performances. I believe I'm the longest signed female to Strikeforce, so I've been with the organization for a while, and they have a lot invested in me. And Ronda's kind of, you know, like I said, new to the scene, but either way, for them, whoever wins, it's going to make the fight between the winner of Alexis Davis and Sarah Kaufman that much bigger, because this is really making an explosive motion for women's MMA. Really getting a lot of people interested that weren't interested before, just because of the style matchup and the trash talking and the marketability of the fight. So that will garner more attention for the fight, potentially between myself and Sarah Kaufman or Alexis Davis down the road.
Ronda has made quite a number of comments that were somewhat controversial, everything from comments about Cyborg Santos' failed drug test to Georges St Pierre and Nick Diaz. Do you think that it would be fair to say she's becoming the Chael Sonnen of the female MMA world?
Well, I was actually the one who kind of gave her that nickname. It was when we were talking with Errol Hawani at the same time, and I said, you can kind of have that Chael Sonnen attitude, but it doesn't mean anyone's going to like you. And in her way, she is, she's kind of taken that, controversial way. She's very controversial in the way that she markets herself. She gets people interested by saying things that either piss people off or make people laugh. That's kind of her marketing standpoint. And she's really disrespectful in a lot of ways, which I'm not a fan of. I personally, I value this sport as a sport. I do understand it's entertainment, but, I have so much love and respect for it and the athletes who do it that I would never want to, straight out disrespect someone or, go out there and talk trash, because I have the most respect for everyone who steps in the cage, regardless. It takes a certain kind of person to do that. And, for her to say something like Georges St Pierre is not good for the sport just goes to show how new and ignorant she is to this whole thing. She kind of comes on with this Miss Know-It-All attitude, and she thinks she knows everything about marketing, and, she's just very self-entitled. And she really talked herself into this title fight. It was more her mouth than anything else, more than her wins or skill set and whatnot that really got her this spot. And I don't agree with that. I don't think she belongs here. I want to do everything in my power to send her to the back of the line.
Well, I really appreciate that, because I think there's something to be said for both sides of the coin, because I recognize what you're saying. In some way, she is like Chael Sonnen, trying to put butts in the seat and create controversy, or like Nick Diaz, who you either love or hate.
Right.
But the other side of it is, if you're going to yak it up, you better back it up. And if she can't back it up, she's going to be out pretty quick. So this is going to be a real test. It's going to be interesting to see. We really appreciate you coming in and taking the time to join us. And, we're looking forward to your fight. We wish you the best of luck there. How can our listeners follow you in the future?
Hit me up on Twitter. I Facebook too, but Twitter's a little simpler and easier and short and sweet. So, I try to make an effort to be on Twitter all the time, and I usually respond to everyone. So it's just at Miesha Tate, MIESHATATE, and you guys can follow me there and support me, whether you're a Ronda fan or a Miesha fan or just curious about women's MMA. Just make sure you tune in March 3rd, because we're gonna throw down, and it's gonna be a spectacular fight. And I promise I'm gonna bring 110% of everything that I have to that fight, because I absolutely do not want to lose that fight. So I'm working hard, and as a champion, I'm gonna bring everything I've got.
Well, I appreciate that, and we're gonna look forward to that. And we will be plugging it from now until the day of the fight. And we thank you for joining us. We wish you the best of luck in that fight. Thank you, Miesha Tate.